Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're tackling a concept from Karl Marx, and it sounds really complex, but it's surprisingly relevant to, well, everything. The relationship between rising mass and the falling rate of profit.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea, and Marx, writing in the Grundrisse, really digs into how the increasing scale of production can actually lead to a decrease in profits over time.
Okay, that sounds a little counterintuitive. You'd think more stuff equals more money, right?
Yeah, you would, but Marx saw a deeper dynamic at play within the capitalist system. He argued that as capitalists invest in bigger and better ways to produce more and more goods, it can actually eat into their profits.
So let's unpack this. First, can you give us like a quick picture of Karl Marx? What was he all about?
Well, Marx was a 19th century philosopher and economist, and he was really critical of the capitalist system. He saw it as a system that was driven by the pursuit of profit, where the main goal was to produce goods for their exchange value, so what they could be sold for, rather than for their actual usefulness.
Okay, yeah, businesses need to make money to survive. But where did Marx's critique come in?
He believed that a lot of economists of his time presented the rules of capitalism as if they were unchanging laws of nature. He called out folks like John Stuart Mill, arguing that they ignored the historical context of how capitalism developed and how those rules could actually change.
So it wasn't just about how capitalism worked, but how people thought about how it worked.
Exactly. Marx wanted to show that these rules weren't set in stone and that they could lead to some unexpected outcomes. And that brings us to the idea of rising mass.
Okay, let's dive into that. What exactly is rising mass, and how does it connect to this whole profit dilemma?
Rising mass refers to the ever-increasing scale and quantity of goods produced under capitalism. Think about how technology advances, labor gets divided into more specialized tasks, and businesses are constantly looking for ways to make production more efficient. This all results in just a massive amount of stuff being produced.
Okay, I can definitely see that in the world around us. You know, we're surrounded by an abundance of goods.
Exactly. And this trend is playing out in your own life. Just think about how much cheaper and more readily available things like clothes, electronics, even food are compared to a few decades ago. That's rising mass in action.
Yeah, it is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. But how can making more stuff lead to less profit?
That's the fascinating paradox, isn't it? It seems counterintuitive, but it all comes down to how profits are generated. Let's use a simple analogy. Imagine you own a bakery.
Okay, I'm picturing it. The smell of fresh bread, the warm ovens.
Perfect. Now imagine you invest in a giant new oven to bake more bread. This is you investing in what Marx called constant capital, the tools, machinery, and raw materials that are needed for production. The oven itself doesn't directly create more profit per loaf, but the increased output potentially does. The problem arises when all the other bakeries get giant ovens too.
I see where this is going. Increased competition.
Exactly. With everyone producing more bread, the increased supply can lead to lower prices. This means that even though you're baking more, you might not be making more profit per loaf because you have to sell it for less.
So it's not just about how much you produce, it's also about the market and what consumers are willing to pay.
Precisely. And this dynamic can be seen in many industries today. Think about smartphones, clothing, or even food production. There's a constant drive to produce more, stay ahead of the competition, and often this results in price wars and shrinking profits.
This is making me rethink my whole Black Friday shopping list.
We'll maybe hold off on that giant oven purchase for now.
Huh, good point. So if this falling rate of profit is a real concern, why do businesses keep churning out more and more stuff?
It's a complex situation. Marx acknowledged that there are forces that can counteract the falling rate of profit, at least temporarily.
So are there like loopholes in this system? Ways to keep those profit margins up even when everyone's producing more?
Yeah, you could think of them that way. One tactic is to find new markets, essentially more customers to buy all those extra goods. Another is to seek out cheaper labor, which reduces production costs.
That makes sense. Businesses are always looking for ways to cut costs and expand into new territories.
Exactly. And then there's technological innovation. Sometimes a new technology comes along that dramatically reduces production costs.
Like those giant ovens in our bakery example.
Precisely. But even with those countermeasures, Marx believed that the falling rate of profit was a fundamental tendency within capitalism. He saw it as a built-in contradiction.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of this fits together. It's like a puzzle where each piece influences the others.
That's a great way to put it. And to further understand this puzzle, we need to explore another key concept from Marx's work: alienation.
Alienation, that sounds a bit heavy.
It can be. Marx used this term to describe the feeling of disconnect and powerlessness that workers can experience under capitalism.
Okay, I can see how that would happen. If you're on an assembly line doing the same repetitive task all day, you might start to feel like just another cog in the machine.
Exactly. But Marx argued that alienation goes deeper than just feeling, bored or unfulfilled at work. He believed that under capitalism, workers are alienated from several key things: the products of their labor, the process of production itself, and even their own creative potential.
So it's not just that they don't get to keep the fancy cars they're building, it's that they're disconnected from the entire act of creation.
That's right. And this disconnect, according to Marx, can have, major psychological and social consequences. It can lead to feelings of isolation, apathy, and even resentment.
This brings us back to the falling rate of profit, doesn't it?
Mhm.
If workers are alienated and seen as interchangeable parts, it becomes easier to devalue their labor and drive down wages.
Precisely. And as we discussed earlier, this focus on lowering labor costs, what Marx called variable capital, can contribute to the falling rate of profit over time. It creates a kind of downward spiral.
So it's not just about the stuff being produced, it's about the people producing it. Their well-being is tied to the whole system.
Absolutely. Marx saw a deep connection between the economic system and the human experience within that system.
It's all starting to click for me now. Marx is giving us a new way to look at not just capitalism, but the whole way we produce and consume goods.
Yeah, he's offering a critical lens through which we can examine these complex economic forces and consider their wider impact.
I have to say, I'm feeling a lot more informed and maybe a little overwhelmed by all of this. But it's definitely making me think differently about the world around me.
That's the power of these deep dives. They challenge us to look beyond the surface and ask some fundamental questions about the systems that shape our lives.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Rising mass, falling rate of profit, alienation. These are all pretty dense ideas. Why should our listeners care about all of this? What's the key takeaway?
The most important thing to remember is that the economic system we live in isn't some kind of fixed natural order. It's a human-made system with its own quirks, contradictions, and potential for change.
So it's not just about understanding Marx's theories in the abstract. It's about applying those theories to our everyday lives and choices.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the power dynamics at play in the economy and considering how we can create a more just and sustainable system.
I think that's a message that resonates with a lot of people today.
I agree. There's a growing awareness of the need to think differently about economic growth and how it impacts both people and the planet.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Where do we go from here? What other insights from Marx might help us understand the economic forces at play in the world? It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of all of this. There's so much to unpack.
There really is. And while he offered a deep critique of capitalism, he also recognized its incredible productive capacity.
That's true. We live in a world of abundance, at least when it comes to, material goods.
Right. But Marx's analysis challenges us to consider the costs of that abundance. What are the trade-offs? Who benefits? And who might be left behind?
Yeah, and we've talked about the potential for the falling rate of profit, even as the rising mass of production grows. Are there other insights from Marx that can help us understand these dynamics?
Well, one important concept is the idea of contradictions within capitalism. Marx believed that the system's very structure creates these inherent tensions and imbalances.
Could you give us, an example?
Sure. Think about the relationship between capital and labor. Capitalists want to maximize profits, which often means keeping wages low. But if wages are too low, workers can't afford to buy the very goods they're producing.
That creates a problem, doesn't it? You need consumers with buying power to keep the whole system running.
Exactly. Marx saw this as a fundamental contradiction. The drive to maximize profit could ultimately undermine the market itself.
It's almost like a self-destruct button built into the system.
In a way, yes. And this leads to another key concept: crisis. Marx believed that these contradictions within capitalism would inevitably lead to periodic crises. Economic downturns, social unrest, and things like that.
So these aren't just random events, but rather symptoms of a deeper, systemic issue.
That was Marx's argument. He saw crises as these moments of rupture when the contradictions become too great to ignore. And he believed that these crises could actually create opportunities for change.
So what are we to do with all of these insights? Does Marx offer any solutions to these dilemmas?
Well, Marx was more focused on analyzing the system than on prescribing specific solutions. He believed that the path forward would emerge from the struggles and contradictions of capitalism itself.
It's not exactly a roadmap, is it?
Not in a traditional sense, but Marx's work provides us with a powerful set of tools for understanding the economic forces that shape our lives. It encourages us to think critically, to challenge assumptions, and to imagine new possibilities.
I'm starting to see why Marx's ideas are still so relevant today. We're facing a lot of the same challenges: inequality, environmental degradation, economic instability that he was writing about, what, over a century ago?
Yeah. His work reminds us that these challenges aren't just inevitable facts of life. They're the result of choices we make, individually and collectively. And that means we have the power to make different choices, to create a more just and sustainable future.
That's a hopeful message. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity of these issues, but Marx's work reminds us that we're not just passive bystanders.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in shaping the economic landscape, and understanding the dynamics that Marx illuminated can help us make more informed and impactful choices.
Well, deep divers, we've reached the end of our exploration of Karl Marx and the intriguing concepts of rising mass and the falling rate of profit. It's been a thought-provoking journey.
It has, and hopefully it sparks some curiosity in our listeners to learn more and to engage with these ideas in their own lives.
I want to give a huge thanks to our expert for guiding us through this complex terrain.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always a privilege to delve into these fascinating topics.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to continue the conversation. What resonates with you about Marx's analysis? How do you see these forces playing out in the world around you? Let us know your thoughts. Until next time, keep diving deeper.